Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. Let's talk Warped Tour. Warped Tour, the legendary traveling pop punk festival, is doing its last run in 2018, the summer of 2018. It's kind of a big deal. Warped Tour was a huge rock phenomenon for a long time, really kind of up there with Ozfest for a while and kind of outlasted that festival in terms of relevancy in a lot of ways, since Ozfest was mostly sort of thriving off of the whole nu metal thing, which died. Pop punk and a lot of the rock bands that Warped Tour continued to put onto stages after that were very much more contemporary and interesting and cutting edge, while also kind of staying true to a lot of the older and more classic acts in the punk genre and underground rock. So, it's mostly why they kind of lasted as long as they did, but I digress. Down there in the description box is an interview with the festival's founder, and he does talk about and brings up a lot of interesting things about the festival and says a lot of nice things about this upcoming run. I guess I recommend that anybody who wants to get a final taste of this thing to go out and get it. But my question here is, what does this tour say about the state of live music, the state of rock music, the current musical landscape? I don't necessarily think that this tour is a signal of live music being in danger in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if any sort of live event is going to have a hard time continuing and is eventually going to bite the dust, it is an event like Warped Tour, because, you're not just talking about some kind of large, massive, once a year stationary event that is always in the same location every single time they do it. Warped Tour is literally taking dozens and dozens of bands and touring around the entire country, setting up and breaking down every single time. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot to pay all the acts. That's a lot of tickets to sell. That's a lot of grounds to secure so that you actually have a place to do everything. That's a lot of people to pay. That's a lot of production. That's a lot. Like there's a ton that goes into just doing one of those events, much less like breaking it down and building it back up every week across the country. So, excuse me. So there is that to keep in mind. There's a lot going into it, and if you see a drop in sales, if you have people that really aren't into doing it anymore, as the founder sort of says in this interview, he says, I'm old. I don't know if I want to do this shit anymore. He's probably moving on to greener pastures, which kind of makes sense. I mean, he's been in the industry a long time. But also an interesting point down here where he talks about ticket sales is that the ticket sales drop last year for Warped Tour wasn't super huge, but it occurred within a very specific set of Warped Tour's demographic. It was on very much the younger leg of the set of people buying tickets for Warped Tour, which essentially means the youngest millennials out there, the people in the next generation, they're not going to Warped Tour. They're not going to Warped Tour. And that's because for the younger generation, the sound of their rebellion, the sound of their teenage years is a completely different soundtrack. It is not rock music. It is not pop punk. Ladies and gentlemen, it's fucking Gucci Gang. It's Gucci Gang, which, hey, you guys know I like that song. So I'm not necessarily complaining. And what I'm saying here is that the musical landscape is changing. It's changing. The younger generation is going to find different ways of identifying and expressing itself artistically, and that is essentially what is going on here. Warped Tour had a really good run. Honestly, I would say they held the attention span of a very young generation of music fans for longer than, in the grand scheme of things, I thought they would have. Because it's been a while since I've been actually kind of tuned into a lot of the younger pop punkier bands that would typically make it onto the tour. and now that it's finally like starting to see that the youngest ticket buyers in its demographic are kind of like flying away because they're probably going to go see Rolling Loud or something like that, is honestly like to be expected at this point. So I don't think it's that there's a lack of bands. You know, I think it's that there's just a lack of interest among younger people, and they're just turning toward other things. They're turning toward other forms of entertainment. They're turning toward other sounds. I think it's smart that Warped Tour and the founder are kind of bowing out gracefully before this whole thing, ends up becoming a little bit of a wow. They're really trying to string it out now, because honestly, I think if rock and live rock music is to make some sort of comeback and grab people's attention again, it's going to need new faces. It's going to need new ideas. It's going to need new brains who are going to approach this in a totally different way, and who are going to just basically take a different approach and possibly look at it from another angle where they'll actually be able to make it connect to the millennial generation, to the next generation. As talented and as experienced as I'm sure a lot of people on the Warped Tour are, these guys who have been on the tour for years and grew up listening to Bad Religion just do not have any kind of direct connection to these kids who are sharing Lil Pump memes in their Instagram group chats. So it just kind of is what it is. So I'm not sure what the future is going to hold as far as rock music of this style, especially in the live arena. But I think at least with Warped Tour stepping out of the way, it provides a vacuum where somebody could potentially step in and say, okay, I still believe in this music. I'm still passionate about this sound. I'm still passionate about this stuff. I'm going to figure out a way to market it more effectively, bring more artists into the fold that are actually going to grab the attention of exactly the demographics, the super young demographics that we want buying tickets and coming into this festival. And, hopefully that ends up happening. So thank you very much for watching. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Warped Tour, forever.